Thank you. So I'm partially here to give you the answer key. The problem is it's a trick question. So you guys are used to that at MIT and at Cal, so I think you're up to the challenge here. So as Nev said, I'm kind of a confused individual. I've been kind of on both coasts, and I spend part of my days seeing patients with a lot of chronic diseases, including Lyme. And I spend a lot of the rest of my time doing research and looking at data and trying to bring those two together. And there really are different worlds. And Lyme itself, as I think Wendy and Kristen and Nev alluded to, or really directly said, is this really heterogeneous, it's a really confused and broad area where we don't have a lot of answers. And that's one of the big challenges. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to think about and apply some innovation models, which hopefully you guys are good at in the tech side, and how to better apply those into an area that's as broad and kind of confused as this that needs a lot of help. So these are 3 images. I think Wendy just did a beautiful job kind of going through what Lyme disease is, but I can't stress enough how misunderstood this disease is. And these 3 images are a tick, which we've been talking a little bit about, that rash that people get, some people get, and it's actually very few people get. And actually the spirochetes, those are these little bugs. By the way, I'm an infectious disease doc, so these are the guys I'm after in a big way. And it's not just these bugs that are the problem. As numerous speakers have alluded to, there are co-infections that go along with this. And we know so little about these, not only from a diagnostic perspective, but also from a treatment perspective. So when a patient, though, has Lyme disease, odds are actually that they will see none of these 3 things, even though these are actually, I took these images off of Google. These are the first 3 things that will come up when you Google Lyme disease or Borrelia. I had to go to Borrelia to get the spirochetes, but and yet this is so non-representative of what a patient experiences when they have Lyme disease. Because chances are when the patient comes in and sits in front of you, they don't know that they have Lyme disease, and they feel awful, and they can feel awful in so many different ways from a symptom standpoint. And so this cartoon here says, I found the tick, the bullseye, and did 3 weeks of antibiotics and still got the disease. And then the doctor's standing there saying, what disease? And this is another issue where within Lyme disease, there's a lot of controversy and a lot of misunderstanding, both on the patient side but also on the physician side. And we wrestle with this every day. And that leads to a lot of lack of standards in this field. So that's another target area for you all to think about, that there's a lot of confusion around what's the best treatment, and a lot of argument and discussion. And thankfully, people are really starting to dig into this. So something to think about. So the answers. I'm going to stress that for whatever you choose to do in this area, the answers, the best things you can do is provide value to a patient or a doctor or a family member or a researcher. You've got to maintain that relevance, right? Everything that we think about when we try to treat a patient, we need to bring relevance back to one of those groups, and there's other groups as well. And then practicality, how can we actually use this when we're in the field? So one of my other hats is I'm actually a member of Life Sciences Angels. And with that hat on, we advise a lot of companies on what to do and how to go through a process and thinking about a problem. So I borrowed a few steps from that book. And I think I'd like to share those with you today in the context of Lyme disease, because these are steps that people often make mistakes around when they go at a problem, and that's why we actually have some of this confusion within Lyme disease and a lack of understanding. But it's also part of the answer key for you all, and how do you take a part of this problem and bring it to a solution. So step 1 is think about what you do. What is it that you're doing? What is the problem that you are trying to solve, and how and do you really understand that problem? And I put on here, no, really, what is it that you're trying to do? Are you sure? And you really have to be sure. We went at this on an innovations platform with LSA, looking at ideas from NIH, actually NCI investigators, and 9 out of 10 of those investigators, when they really sat down after putting in grants, these are these big fat proposals, when they really sat down in a room and thought about their idea and thought about where it was, it turned out that they were actually trying to solve a completely different problem, and they went back as part of this program we were doing with them and rethought their problem. So I think I'm inviting you to do that, and do that maybe more than once to get at that, the best answer. So from the Lyme perspective, you're already coming at a horribly complex problem. So pick your target of what you're going to do very carefully, and then take a step back and think about it, and then maybe take another step back and think about it again. So answer number 2, who's your customers or who's your audience here? And I've already kind of alluded about this. Again, you've got to think really carefully about this. You know, we run a system called OpenMedNet where we pull data from across lots of different patients, lots of different doctors, and are driving it down the open data pathway that Dr. Honey was talking about. But you really have to think about it when you guys as engineers and other disciplines are interacting with people, whether it's a survey or a user interface or a mobile app or what have you. Usability is key, but it's also that interface, and how are you talking to that audience, and who is your audience? And so there's a lot of perspectives, as I've already said, in Lyme disease. There's patient perspectives, and there's a whole array of those. There's physician perspectives, and there's a whole array of different views there, and researcher perspectives, payers, and so on. So know who you're talking to, regardless of what you're doing. And then what are the issues for those groups or the group that you pick? Maybe you can cross over 2 groups, maybe you can cross over 2 problems. But I would suggest you start with one because of the complexity here. So keep an open mind and don't take the first answer that you see. Again, going back to that experience around how to innovate around problems, and the NCI example, the pathway that we follow, and some of you may want to Google this, is something called Lean Launchpad. And that suggests that we don't know the answers to any of the 4 questions that I'm posing to you, until we've gone back to the groups that we are our clients or our customers or our target audience for our solution 50 to 75 times. And I bet you that most Silicon Valley startups don't do that. And the ones that succeed are the ones that eventually do that. We don't do that as physicians when we see Lyme patients. We don't think about these things. We don't go back 50 to 75 times on something. And it really underscores a hole in medicine, particularly around Lyme disease, where we really haven't gathered all the data that we need to deal with this problem. And so we've failed in the system, and we're looking to you guys to help find part of that solution. So iterate when you're thinking about what those issues. And then how do you address it? This is, again, you really got to think carefully about it. Grab some of the wonderful advisors you have in the room here and in Berkeley. Go Cal. Really, bring back something of value to that audience that you were talking to. So really focusing in on the practicality. From a Lyme perspective, we need help. There are hundreds of thousands of patients with this condition, and probably, as others have alluded to, that's probably a gross underestimate. Just to put that in perspective, was it last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember now, CDC revised their estimates of the number of patients with Lyme disease from 30,000 to 300,000 per year. Oops, rounding error, no order of magnitude change. You know there's a problem when we have an order of magnitude change like that in any condition. So that's tremendous, and there's a ton of people out there that need your help. So thank you for that, and go get them. I just wanted to close with one, since we're at MIT, one of my heroes, Noam Chomsky, said, changes in progress very rarely are gifts from above. Rather, they're a struggle from below. And we're inviting you guys, and thank you for taking up the challenge to have lots of little struggles from below, and we're here to help you with that. And let's find some answers.